huge Texans update for the injury report. There's been a lot of injuries this season for Texans players overall, but a couple players exiting and a couple players returning off of IR. We'll talk about what this means for the rest of the season, how it's going to impact the team, and likely what's going to be the solution to these problems of players getting hurt. If you're new here, welcome to Texans Digest. We're talking Texans news all season long, all year long, everything. It's coming right here. First thing we got to talk about is the injuries. Injuries have, obviously, like I said in the intro, they've been happening all season long. Nico Collins with the hamstring. You have Stephon Diggs went down with the ACL. It's been a lot of injury-riddled season. Joe Mixon was hurt early on. Will Anderson missed a couple games. And now, probably the biggest news of all, Jalen Pitre has officially been ruled out for the remainder of the season. Pitre was a lockdown guy. Maybe not lockdown, but he's improved a lot. And from what I've seen this year, he's been that spark plug on defense. Jalen Pitre has helped out that defense so much. And when you have a guy who's now officially out for the season with a partially torn pectoral muscle, and I talked about it in a previous video, but we weren't 100% sure if he was going to return. It was likely season ending, but there was no actual confirmation. Now we have a report from Aaron Wilson saying that Pitre is likely to undergo season-ending surgery. We didn't know if surgery was going to be required, but that partially torn pec is going to require surgery. Definitely not good to hear for Pitre. We hope he gets a quick recovery. He's been a great player for the Texans all season. I questioned his ability last year. He did have a lot of raw talent and a lot of great tackling abilities, but he's developed so much in just a year, and being able to hone in and man that it's been unreal. So we're wishing Pitre a speedy recovery, but that was the biggest news. The other news is that Kenyon Green is, well, we'll talk about players returning in just a second, but Juice Scruggs, left guard for the Texans, expecting to miss 2 weeks. He played center for a little while, switched him over to guard, and now we really have a big hole at the left guard spot with Scruggs not going on IR, but he will miss a couple weeks. And just looking at the injury list, or who's going to play left guard, would rather, former Patriot Zach Thomas was seen in the replacement of Juice Scruggs, which he was, the backup. So not the best option, but we'll see what Zach Thomas can do. The thing that I said with Kenyon Green is potentially coming back. So we heard news, maybe it'll be a little bit of Thomas and Green, considering we're a little slim at that position. Green's coming back off injury. Do you play him 100%? Is he on a snap count? Does he play at all? So a lot of questions and speculations as to what the Texans can actually do. But one thing's for certain, Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for the Texans, actually very happy with how the offensive line has played in recent weeks. Stroud, one of the most sacked quarterbacks in all of football, and top 5 at least. It's not looking great. But the past 2 weeks, Bobby Slowick expressed how happy he was with the offensive line's improvement, and that's good to hear from your offensive coordinator. He said that Laremy Tunsil, their left tackle, was playing probably the best football he's had in the past 2 weeks, so that's good to hear. Small sample size, but as we get closer and closer to the playoffs, this is what you want to hear coaches start saying. You don't want to hear coaches saying, we feel like we're doing nothing, and I don't know what coach is going to say that practically, like, hey, we're not doing good. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of positive stuff said from coaches, but there's also times where DeMeco has come out and said, hey, we got to play better here. We got to do this better. So that's where my hesitant comes in. But it's good to hear that they're confident in their ability. Offensive line has been a problem all season long. So if we can get that figured out towards the playoffs, that's a huge sign. Now, players that are returning. There's a lot of them. And it's actually pretty big for I would say, linebacker Christian Harris is supposed to be returning. And that is a huge, absolutely huge addition. Christian Harris, missing him all season long. It's actually funny, some of the comments he had from running back Joe Mixon. We'll pull it up right now. Joe Mixon commented on Christian Harris last year when he played him, and he said, "Who the heck is this guy? He wasn't on the scouting report, but he should have been." And it was just funny for me to listen to that because Mixon, Harris went under the radar, and they're happy to get him back. In terms of how much he plays, that's a different story. Mixon talked about how they don't know how they're going to incorporate him. But when he's out there, he's going to give 1,000% effort, and he's going to be a great uplift for this defense. So good news for running back Joe Mixon to talk about Harris's return. However, linebacking core is very slim. Azeez Al-Shaair is out, suspended indefinitely. So Al-Shaair definitely not great. He'll be back week 18. We talked about the suspension and what happened with the late hit in the last video if you want to check it out. But linebackers, very slim. Harris would be a huge improvement to kind of replace Shaair. And we'll see what happens. The offensive line has been a little rocky, but as far as the other return, it's Kenyon Green. And Kenyon Green, the 15th overall selection out of Texas A&M, and the Texans traded back from 13 to 15. They said, all right, we're going to draft. And I like the pick. It wasn't, at the time, it wasn't a bad pick. It was just a little bit of a reach. He was a second-round grade, and Zion Johnson was right there, and he went to the Chargers. But besides the point, as of what we're talking about in the present day here, Kenyon Green was seen at practice. But the biggest thing I want to address here is that earlier this season, October, he was benched. So he even said it himself. He's got to do a better job. And it's definitely a question as to, do you put him back in? Do you split him with time with Zach Thomas? So definitely a tough situation for the Texans to be in. Their offensive line has played well. I wonder if Kenyon Green is going to see snap time. But this is, again, the injuries are not a good time to get them. Try and get those out like earlier in the season. Like I said with Nico Collins, you want your players to be healthy, especially heading into the playoffs. But now that brings me into my final topic here with the rest of the season. You want to have all your players coming back off injury now, because the rest of the season, it's very, very tough. And the Texans have had it kind of light. They edged out the Bills. They had the Patriots. They played the Jaguars. They played a bunch of, I will say, lighter teams. They've had a little bit of an easier road, we'll say. Most of the games they've won this year have been by one score. It's been pretty crazy of a season. And when you lose to the Jets, you blow the lead to the Lions with the multiple interceptions. Like, the defense has been playing well. The biggest thing is, obviously, players. The health has been a big problem this year, but not even that. The secondary has been getting torched over the top, so definitely not the best sign there. However, you mentioned injuries. You go at home this week off of a bye, which is huge. Dolphins, Chiefs, Ravens. 3 games that are not gimmies at all. The Dolphins game is probably the lightest game on there, but then you Chiefs, Ravens. And the Titans is not a gimme either. They beat us earlier in the season. However, I do think we'll split. But looking at the season as a whole right now, Texans fans, do not worry, because there is a very low possibility that the division gets taken away. And even if you have a couple bad games against the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and even if you lose out the rest of the season, the Colts don't have much of an easier schedule either. Plus, their team hasn't looked that great either. Now, is there a chance that the Colts can win their last 4 games? The Texans can lose 3, and the Colts go 9-8. Texans go 9-8, and actually that wouldn't even matter. If the Texans win one more game and the Colts win out with the 4 games left this year, it's a matter of it'll be 10 wins, 10-7. So 10-7. If the Texans win 2 more games, they've locked in a playoff spot because they swept them this year. So if the Colts win out, the Texans have to beat the Dolphins and the Titans. But if it's a lot of if this happens, if that happens. But the likelihood is very small for the Colts to jump us in the division standings and take the division. I personally don't see it happening just because the Colts winning out sounds just terrible for the kind of season that they've had. Don't want to knock the Colts by any means, but the Texans are a much better football team than the Indianapolis Colts. And all you have to do is get through the regular season. If you can get through this year, beat the Dolphins, beat the Titans, and have a couple rough games, Chiefs, Ravens, or even if you lose out the season and you get lucky and you get into the playoffs, all you have to do at this point is get to the playoffs. And if you can improve throughout every game, I think we win at least 2 games the rest of the season, and that will clinch us. But once you get to the playoffs, that is a different breed. And for how the teams have been playing this year, if they show up into the playoffs like that, they're going to get absolutely smacked. But I do believe they can correct it, and there has been a history of second-year quarterbacks going on Super Bowl runs. Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy, Russell Wilson. You go back a couple years, but decades, if you would, Big Ben, Brady, Kurt Warner. There's been an onslaught of just quarterback names that have been to Super Bowls as second-year guys. So it's the sophomore slump has been real. It's been a tough season for the Texans, but I do believe in them to turn it around, and we will have to take it one game at a time, the Dolphins, and just improve what we can. Get these players ready. Get these players feet back on the ground. Guys like Christian Harris, you don't have to play him every down, but just get him back to normal, get him back to playing. Maybe bring J.J. Watt out of probably not going to happen, but I would hope so. So the goal here is to maybe go to an AFC championship. If the Texans are able to win a wild card game and improve of what they did last year and go to the AFC championship game, that would be, even if you made it and you didn't win the AFC championship, that would be an actual awesome season. I would say, yes, if the Texans won the AFC championship game with the way, or even made it, with the way they're playing right now, that is a successful season. Now, even getting to the playoffs seems like a successful year with losing Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins was hurt. You had Will Anderson was hurt. Joe Mixon was banged up earlier in the year. Jalen Pitre's out for the year. There's been so many injuries and reasons why the Texans should not have won a lot of these games with the way their offensive line has been playing, their offense in general. And there's just been so many problems with this team, and it really has just been a sophomore slump. And if they could battle back in the playoffs, it could be a year for Texans fans to remember. So I want everyone to remember what this team is capable of. I know they're playing bad right now, but they can turn it around just like that. Playoff football is different all the time. But thank you everyone so much for watching. That was the injury update video. We'll get a Dolphins preview out there as well for Friday. But again, thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.